This evening here on BBC Radio London. New figures from the dog racing industry suggest over 1,000 racing greyhounds die or are killed each year. It's also been revealed racing dogs suffer almost 5,000 injuries a year. The information comes from the Greyhound Board of Great Britain. That's the body which governs registered greyhound tracks in the UK. And earlier I spoke to Mark Bird. He's the managing director of that Greyhound Board of Great Britain.
Well, it's the first time we've actually published these figures. It was a requirement and negotiation between ourselves and DEFRA. And so it was trying to gauge the scale of why greyhounds, if at all, why some of them don't make it to the end of their racing careers. And that 1,000 is based on some injuries which are fatal at tracks. But you've got to also remember some of those are down to deaths which would occur in the domestic dog market, so things like sudden deaths or terminal illnesses. So there's a whole raft of reasons as to why there are those 1,000 dogs on our sheets. But you've got to remember that's against a backdrop of about 12 to 14,000 dogs that are being run each year. And
there are a number of injuries, aren't there? What were the figures there?
Well, the injuries that were recorded by track vets, so it's been looked at by people who are objected to this, because at all race meetings and trials there's a vet in attendance. There were 4,800. That's injuries. That's not 4,800 dogs that were injured. That's injuries. So a dog could actually get 2 injuries theoretically in a race, and that would be recorded as 2 injuries to that one dog.
What about the League Against Cruel Sports and others who say that these figures now are showing that it's time to halt the greyhound racing industry? What would you say to them? Okay, well, I'm not really here to defend our position with those that are opposed to greyhound racing, regardless of what strides we take to improve the industry. What I would say is that I think most of the groups that are opposed to greyhound racing were very surprised. They wouldn't admit it, but they were surprised at how low those figures were. There's been calls for 10,000 greyhounds disappearing, and we've accounted for all of our greyhounds. We do work with what we see as more formal welfare charities such as the RSPCA, Dogs Trust, and of course the Greyhound Trust. And what would you say to people who do think that it's cruel? Would you say that greyhound racing's cruel? Obviously you're not going to say that, but why do you think they would think that it was cruel?
I think, and listen, I was someone who wasn't in this industry as of 3 years ago. I came into it to specifically root out people who perhaps have been cruel to greyhounds. But I think if you speak to most owners and trainers, they're all exactly the same as most people in this country. They love dogs, especially greyhounds. And I think if you could sit those people down with those people who perhaps misguided or otherwise, I think that it's a cruel sport. I'm pretty sure that a lot of these people would actually have a view otherwise.
In London, there's only Romford left, isn't there? And it seems like a shame, because there was a big greyhound racing industry in London, and Wimbledon Stadium's now closed. What is the future of greyhound racing?
Okay, there's lots of people who said that there were too many tracks for the sport as it stood. And as you said quite rightly, Wimbledon closed within the last year or so. We've also got Crayford, don't forget. So you've got Romford and Crayford, so there are 2 tracks.
Yes, yeah.
But I think the basis of the sport is the fact that online is probably going to be the biggest part of it in terms of the sort of gambling side of it. But actually what's good news is the fact that the remaining 22 tracks are across England and Scotland. The welfare standards are much higher. The integrity of the sport is world class in terms of sort of doping and also in terms of the betting side of it. So I think it certainly has got a future. It's just a question of whether that remains in bookmaker shops or it remains online.
You've launched a greyhound commitment, haven't you? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay, so the figures, as I said, the first time we've actually published them. So in conjunction with that, we published an 8-point plan, which is solely around greyhound welfare. So some of the greyhounds which currently are put to sleep because they can't be homed, we want to really try and address those numbers and bring those numbers down over the next 5 years. Because with all breeds of dog, I think greyhounds are considered to be something that they're not. And as someone who's actually taking a retired greyhound into our own family, we can completely agree with that. But actually it's about the misconception. So the greyhound commitment is really about trying to look at all the welfare initiatives that we've got going currently, because it's not from a standing still position, but also to look at other initiatives, which means that actually fewer greyhounds are put to sleep either on the track or away from the track at the end of their racing careers.
That'd be so. And I know places like Battersea Dogs and Cats Home face the same issues because they're putting.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it, but Battersea taking 5,000 dogs from the streets of London every year, and they euthanize 1,000 as being unsuitable. I mean, for me, it's when we can make the differences. At the moment, the trainers are really the ones who are making the assessment as to whether a dog should be looked to be homed or whether or not it should be put to sleep. And, you know, what we keep saying is, okay, they do know best about the dog in its racing environment, but when you've had if it's a male dog, for example, you've had it neutered, and actually it's away from the racing side of it, as I know with the dog that we're homing, it's a completely different animal. And greyhounds, I have to say, I thought they were snappier than they are. They are what I refer to as Velcro dogs. They just want to please people, and there's very little in terms of other breeds. I would say that they're right up the scale in terms of actually wanting to be in a loving home. So there's lots of work to do, but that's part of what my mandate is, really, is to try and get things changed. And part of that's the perceptional aspect of it as well.
Mark Bird from the Greyhound Board of Great Britain got some tweets on this.